Should churches ban AI or completely embrace it? I actually think that most church leaders are asking entirely the wrong questions. AI is already in the building. Staff members are trying it, pastors are experimenting it, communication teams are running with it. The real question that churches should be asking instead is, does your church actually understand what it is, how it works, and where the line should be drawn before people start using it without thinking about it? In this video, I want to help you understand what AI actually is, what is happening when you type something into it, where it can help your church, where it can actually hurt your church, and why I think that every church needs a clear AI policy before it gets a little messy. I'm Adam with Connect Ministries. We help churches meet new people. We give churches practical tools and strategies that actually help. We've helped over 2,000 churches meet more than 250,000 new people. And in this video, we're gonna cover three main things. First, what AI actually is and how it works, a little bit about what LLMs are, what that means. Second, what it's really good at, what it's kind of bad at. And then third, we're gonna talk about how you can build a wise policy for your church to be able to use AI correctly. To get started, let me give you the simplest framework that I know. There's two main ways you can use AI. It can be an author or it can be a tool. And what I want to argue is that you should be using AI as a tool and not the author. It can become this very easily, and the distinction between these two is going to matter more and more for churches over the next few years. If your church never makes that distinction clearly, you're going to drift fast into suddenly AI is the author of everything you're doing. Most of the tools people are using right now are built on what are called large language models, commonly referred to as LLMs. And the simplest way to understand an LLM is this. It generates text by predicting what token should come next. So let's unpack that as well. A token is just a small chunk of text. Sometimes it's a whole word, sometimes it's part of a word, sometimes it's just punctuation. Tokens average about 4 characters long, or on average about 3/4 of a word. The models are not reading language the way you and I read language. It is processing these little tokens of text and then predicting one step at a time what token is most likely to come next based on everything that came before it. And then it's going to recommend what the most next likely token is after that. Before we get into a lot about how AI actually chooses those words or those tokens, we need to talk about how it gets trained. A large language model starts by being trained on an enormous amount of text, books and articles and websites and research papers and documentation and all sorts of information across the internet and real books and things. But during training, all of this language is fed into the system again and again and again and again. This language is just shoved into this model. And then what the model is learning from that data is not how an engine runs in a car. It's not learning how to emulate Jesus' character from the Bible. It's not learning judgment or truth or any of those things. What the LLM, the large language model, is doing is it's learning patterns. Patterns in words and phrases, and patterns in sentence structure, patterns in tone, and patterns in how people explain ideas and ask questions and tell stories. It's just patterns in these tokens, and it's patterns in how they organize the information. So when people say that AI was trained on data, what they mean is that it was exposed to a massive amount of language and learned the statistical patterns inside of that language. The training is what makes it so powerful. It's absorbed all of this information, a huge amount of human writing, and learned how language tends to work mathematically. How it tends to just compress down into this. It's compressed down through training, and it just learns the statistics of how the language works. So let's actually take a look at it. When you write in a prompt, like write an email inviting parents to our summer event, the model is not sitting here thinking, okay, what do parents actually care about? What's the heart behind this ministry that I'm leading? What will get the parents to show up? How do I best craft this invitation? It's not thinking like a human. That's not what it's doing at all. It's much more mathematical. It's taking your prompt, looking at the patterns from your prompt and the patterns it learned during training, and it's generating the most likely next token, and then the most likely next token, and then it's generating the most likely next token. And then it's generating the most likely next token until you get a full response where it's an email that says, "Dear parents, I hope you and your family are doing well." And it's just not thinking about what those parents actually care about. And because of that, because of how it works, it can sound incredibly fluent, and it's very, very good at language patterns. They've seen, again, this massive amount of text, and they've learned association between all of these words and all of these phrases and tones and styles way better than any human ever could. And it's excellent at this pattern completion. But AI is not a truth-spitting machine. It's a probability machine for language. That means it is making very advanced guesses at what text should come next. And a lot of time those guesses are impressive, and that's why people use these tools, and they think they're amazing. It can brainstorm amazing. It can summarize meeting notes really well. It can rewrite an email for you. It can organize your thoughts. It can imitate tone or imitate somebody else's style, and it will do way faster than you could ever dream to. I know a lot of you already tested it outside of church life. You've asked it to plan your vacation. You've asked it to make you a meal plan. You've asked it to organize your week, and sometimes it was kind of impressive. It was kind of cool what it did for you. One time it gave you an itinerary for your trip. It said sunrise hike, museum, seafood lunch, walking tour, late dinner reservation, and you have toddlers. My wife is allergic to seafood, and it recommended we go to a seafood restaurant. So sometimes it's not very impressive. But I want to go a little bit deeper. These models are trained in stages. First, they learn these language patterns from massive data sets. That's how they build their internal map of language patterns. But then these models go to another stage, where humans help shape their behaviors using approaches like reinforcement learning from human feedback. That process helps make the tool more useful, more conversational, and generally more aligned with what people want from the interaction with this tool. That's why all the AI tools feel a little bit different. There's ChatGPT coming from OpenAI, Gemini from Google, Claude from Anthropic, Copilot from Microsoft, and all of these kind of live in the same category, but they differ in tone, and they differ in kind of their integrations and their strengths and what they're used for, and all these different companies are trying to make them speak in a slightly different way. Some might work really well with documents, some are really good at search engines or searching for things, some are amazing at coding work. Some may feel better for a longer form writing to try to help you brainstorm through that. Some try to just be positive no matter what. Some of them will agree with anything you say. You can tell it that it's wrong and it'll say, yeah, you're right, you're right. At the end of the day, LLMs are a tool that is highly geared to predicting text and generating text, and it's shaped, all of them are shaped slightly differently to achieve certain desired outputs. So if you remember only one sentence from this entire section, AI is a prediction engine. It predicts the most likely next token. It does not guarantee the truth ever. And real quick, I'd love to hear your thoughts. How is your church currently using AI? Is it in staff workflows, in your communication pipelines, in your planning for different events? Is it in your graphics and you're just building all your graphics through that? Are you completely avoiding it? Drop that in the comments. I'd love to see how churches are actually using it and where they land on this right now. So now we actually understand what AI actually is. You can take a deep breath. Let's take So now that we understand what AI actually is, you can take a deep breath. Let's talk about what it's actually good at. In my opinion, AI is often most useful when your team is stuck at the starting line and you need ideas and you need options for something, you need a rough structure for something, you need help rewording something, or getting from a blank page to draft number 1. This is where these tools can genuinely be super useful. They're very good at brainstorming, like we've mentioned, and rewriting and summarizing and organizing and structuring ideas and content. So for a church team, that might look like asking it, can you brainstorm me some names for an outreach event? Or can you rewrite this email I've already written just a little bit more clearly? And you can explain the audience to it. You can turn these notes into a meeting agenda. You can simplify this paragraph for our website. Or one of my favorites is list all of these questions, list 45 questions for me to be able to think through every possibility for this new idea that I'm doing, for this new video that I'm shooting, for this new thing that I'm launching. Get it to ask as many different ideas as you can. But all of those can save a lot of time, but this is where it gets a little bit shaky. People stop treating it like a starting point, and they actually start to treat it as the author or even the decision maker. That's where the trouble starts, because the model does not know your church, it does not know your people, it does not know your context or your theology. It generates language. It predicts the next right word. You can tell it those things, you can tell it all of that, but it will not learn those things. It just will predict the next right thing. And that's why I want to keep the principle kind of broad right here, is that AI is usually strongest when it assists human work. It becomes dangerous when people start quietly letting it replace human discernment. In the next video, we're going to look a lot more specific at sermon prep and the authorship and where pastors should draw the line. And then maybe in another video, we're going to look more into practical church use cases of exactly how you should be using AI in your church. But for this first video, I want to stay on the bigger issue: what the tool is, what it does, and lastly, why churches need to build a policy around it and how to build that policy. So let's look at the risks here as well, because this is where churches can get hurt if they move a little too casually. The first major risk is what's called hallucinations. That's the term people use when AI confidently gives you something false and fabricated and entirely wrong and completely fake. It may sound polished, it may sound academic and certain, it may even give you some references that look kind of real, and it can still be completely wrong. And one of the most important things to understand is that hallucination is not a random bug that sometimes happens once in a while when you're using AI. It's core to how the technology of how LLMs work. Because again, the model is optimizing for the most likely next token, the most likely language, not the truth. It doesn't know the truth. So if somebody on your staff is using AI to surface facts or theological claims or statistics, and they're looking for references, they need to know about hallucinations. You need to verify everything that comes out of AI. You do not trust it because it sounds polished or confident. The second issue is privacy. And for churches, this is huge. Prompts that are entered into these tools can often be stored and often used to improve the service. Occasionally you can turn that off with a few of them, but think about that in church life. If a staff member drops in counseling details, or private prayer requests, or a conflict among staff or church members, or some financial matters, this is a privacy risk if they're giving this to the tools, and it's a breach of trust, and it could hurt the reputation of your church. So one of the simplest rules a church can have is this: just don't put sensitive or identifiable information into public AI tools. That one rule alone could save a lot of pain for a church. And then there's one I think that is a sneaky risk. It's called policy drift. And by that, I mean that a church just never talks about AI clearly among their staff or among key volunteers. Nobody names boundaries and defines what's permitted and what is prohibited, and what also even requires disclosure. So one staff member starts using it one way, another uses it a different way, a volunteer uses it this way, a pastor experiments with it privately this way, and before long the church has a culture around AI that nobody meant to create, and you've drifted away and you've started giving authorship to AI. This is why I encourage churches to build a policy. Not because you need a giant legal manual that you need to follow exactly, not because every church has to have the same policy, but because wise leadership builds boundaries before your culture shifts. So let me give you a simple framework. If I were helping a church build an AI policy today, I would start first with a conversation and not a document. I'd get the right people in the room and start to ask questions. Questions like, where are we comfortable using AI? Where are we not comfortable using AI? What kind of ministry tasks feel appropriate for AI assistance, and what kind of tasks are a little bit too sensitive for AI? What information should absolutely never be entered into these public AI tools? When does AI-assisted work always need human review? When does it require being disclosed that we're using AI? And who owns the final responsibility for everything that we publish or teach or share or put out online? Because that needs to be clear. Then after that conversation, I would build the policy around a few simple sections: purpose, principle, permits, prohibits, and process. Yes, it's all the letter P. So, starting with purpose, answer the question of why do we even have this policy? The answer to that is because AI can be useful, it can save time, it can help teams move faster, it can help you get unstuck, but it also raises questions about truth and privacy and authorship and accountability and ministry wisdom. So go into the purpose of this policy and really dive deep into that. And the purpose is not to panic at AI or overreact to AI. It's to make sure your church uses these tools intentionally, wisely, in a way that protects trust. Second is principle. This is the big idea behind the whole policy. It should be the one sentence that dictates your church's AI policy. Here's one example. AI may assist human work. It may not replace human judgment, responsibility, or accountability. Whatever you make this sentence here, it's the principle that says this is kind of what we do with AI and this is what we don't. If your team remembers this one sentence, it should be this one, and it should set the direction of your use with AI. Thirdly is the permits. What kind of uses do you use AI for? What are you comfortable with? This is where you name what feels appropriate, things like brainstorming and organizing and drafting and putting the non-sensitive information in there and rewriting, and you can just list all of the things that your team is comfortable using AI for. It gives you the freedom to be able to do whatever you want in this section. The prohibits is the exact opposite. Number 4, prohibits. This is where you get really clear about what is definitely out of bounds. Things like entering confidential information, publishing claims that are not verified, using AI-generated material as though it's correct and truthful, or anything that your leadership believes crosses the line for your church. If you don't define what is prohibited, people are going to start guessing and they're going to cross boundaries that they didn't even know was there. Lastly is process. This is where you explain how your church actually handles AI use in practice. How do you actually verify the content that it gives you? How do you actually protect the privacy of people? How do you make sure that you're not putting any counseling details or identifiable information or anything in there that is going to be identifiable for somebody? And then who owns this policy? Who reviews this policy? Who updates this policy? Who is the person you go to if you have questions about how to use it? Because if everybody owns it, that means that nobody actually owns it. And finally, how do you train your team and actually make sure that this happens, that this policy is followed? Explain why the rules exist and bring it back up often and loudly, because you don't want to let your church shift and drift away. So this is exactly why we created a free Church AI conversation guide. It includes team discussion questions, a sample AI policy, and space for your church to customize it with your own answers and decisions. So if you want help starting that conversation with your staff or leadership team, grab that resource on our website. The link is in the description.